Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by robotic process automation pioneer SS&C Blue Prism. Digital transformation has the potential to reshape the way companies service their customers, engage their employees, and manage their operations. Whether you're looking to develop strategies, tactics, or best practices to positively impact the future of work, or you're curious to see how other companies have successfully navigated their digital transformation programs, then this podcast is for you. We're here to help you transform now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Hairston with SS&C Blue Prism. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. Today, I'm excited to have with me Rohit Panikkar, a partner with McKinsey, and his colleague, Leon Xiao, an associate partner with McKinsey. Rohit has been on the podcast twice before, and this is Leon's initial time to join us. I will be talking with them about the key findings recently released from McKinsey's third automation survey. Welcome, Rohit and Leon. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourselves?
Thanks, Brad, and thanks for the opportunity. Hi, everyone. I'm Rohit Panikkar. As Brad said, I'm a partner in our McKinsey Chicago office. I'm part of the operations practice, and I spend most of my time working with clients across the industrial, logistics, and distribution space focused on process optimization using digital technologies, including automation and intelligent document processing, and a lot of the other tools out there that we're going to spend some time talking about today. So thanks again, Brad, for the opportunity and looking forward to the conversation.
Hi, everyone. This is Leon Xiao. I'm very glad to be here. Same as Rohit, I'm also from McKinsey's operations practice based out of Chicago. In the past few years, I've been focusing my work on the intersection of digital automation and corporate functions, specifically in finance and procurement for most of the cases. I help CFOs and CPOs transform their ways of working with technologies and to deliver optimal efficiency, effectiveness, and employee experience.
Fantastic. It's great to have you both on the podcast today. Thank you for joining. McKinsey's third survey on automation was conducted in late 2021, and the summarized results, titled "Your Questions About Automation Answered," were published a couple of months ago. And I believe you had somewhere north of 600, 700 participants, 2/3 of whom indicated that they were at least piloting automation technologies. So with that context, let's go ahead and dive into the key findings. Rohit, let me start with you. What did the survey reveal about the pervasiveness of automation across industries and regions?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And to start off, I think so, to your point, this is the third time we're running the survey. And every year we've seen, the number of companies and industries that are adopting automation, whether it being full-scale implementation, pilots, or just dabbling, increasing steadily. We've got, you mentioned it earlier, we have about 700 or so respondents this time from about 60 countries and 20 different industries. All of these are executives in roles where they're actually leading the programs, part of the programs of automation programs within their organizations. And our survey, over the 3 editions, we've seen every year a steady increase in adoption of automation technologies from about 55 or so % in our first edition back in 2018 to now closer to about 70% in the most recent one, which is sort of our 22 edition of the survey. Our second edition, coincidentally, was released. The survey was conducted actually just before the pandemic in January of 2020. And so none of those effects were actually captured in the prior survey. So we're starting to see some of those themes coming through in this one. And in terms of the depth of automation, we're seeing companies all across the spectrum. So a lot more piloting and active programs. And as expected, now that we're probably, 5 years from the first one, starting to see a lot more organizations scaling it and seeing the benefits of those programs being realized.
That's great to hear. And Rohit, what are the top reasons that companies are pursuing automation?
The top reason that companies are pursuing automation is driving effectiveness of their business processes. And a close second is actually improving experiences for customers and employees. Now, this is actually a bit of a contrast to our initial editions of the survey, when a lot of the reasons were we heard the words efficiency and cost coming up a lot more. But this time it's actually shifted much more to be about employees and customers and driving overall effectiveness rather than just efficiency.
Hmm. 'Hmm. 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 So, Leon, let me ask you a question. In the automation category, what did you find are the top technologies that companies are leveraging besides RPA?
What we have found is that in general, the adoption of all kinds of technologies are on the rise. Kind of break it down a little bit. Our survey revealed that aside from RPA, robotic process automation, most of us are very familiar with, we've also seen close to 50%, like half of the organizations, have also deployed intelligent document processing or optical character recognition technologies.
Mhm.
And we have also seen this trend of adoption steadily increasing over the past few years. So that's number one. Additionally, we also found that more than 40% of the organizations have made progress beyond piloting phase with some of the other technologies, such as business process or case management platforms, as well as machine learning algorithms. The last thing I want to note is that we also see a quick emergence of local no-code platforms and chatbots uh, that are, having a kind of increase of adoption. Our respondents actually indicates that more than 30% of them have also tried these two technologies as well.
Okay. And Leon, what are the most common benefits companies are realizing from automation?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Rohit actually kind of alluded to it a little bit. So what we found is that two-thirds of the companies that responded to our survey indicate that they have experienced each of the potential positive outcomes that we asked about, which includes improvement in quality control, customer satisfaction, employee experience, as well as reduction in operating expenses. The one thing I want to note is that there is actually a shift from what we heard a few years ago, where a lot of the companies were primarily solving for just freeing up resources through automation. One other thing I do want to point out is that we also have seen some variations by industry. For example, financial services, we still see that they are more likely to cite cost saving as the biggest benefit. Whereas like professional service companies would cite improvement in quality control as the top benefit to them. So just wanted to kind of caveat a little bit.
So, Rohit, what did the survey reveal about the importance of making automation a strategic priority?
So in 2018 and in the 2020 survey, we called out that organizations that are successful with automation efforts, right? And success defined in their own words against their own objectives, right? Organizations that are successful make automation a strategic priority, right? This is not a one unit within a function or a division or one leader that's driving this, right? This is a pretty pervasive effort, transformative effort across the organization. And the latest results actually show that this is still true, right? So
Mhm.
an automation program or a transformation is actually at the highest levels, and it is a strategic priority for the organization. In fact, so much so that we're seeing that respondents from these organizations who are successful, and you'll see that in the article, we've called them the automation leaders. They're actually twice more likely than others to cite customer and employee experience as a strategic priority enabled by automation, right? So this idea that it's not just make automation a priority, but why are you making it a priority becomes an important factor. And to the point we've just discussed a couple of times, it's make it a priority so you can help your customers and
Mhm.
help your employees.
Very good. And Rohit, did the survey reveal that automation success has any correlation with the size and the shape of the changes that companies are pursuing?
Yeah, quite a bit actually, Brian. I mean, it's interesting because how you pursue automation also has a lot to do with whether you're successful or not. In many cases, the idea of making it a strategic priority means that companies that are the automation leaders again, right, the ones who are successful, are actually making pretty sweeping process changes part of that automation agenda. And so this idea of taking much more of a zero-based design or a clean sheet approach and applying automation as just one of multiple levers to rethink processes, right? So including things like demand reduction or streamlining the process or applying advanced analytics or AI, right? And bringing all of these levers to bear when you look at these processes. And also, when you think about it from a lens of what can you do to improve experience, not just what can you do to reduce cost, it creates a different dimension for companies to be looking at.
Mm. And Rohit, you mentioned some of the more innovative kind of design approaches like zero-based design. You were on our podcast in the past to discuss this. How does that approach factor into automation success?
Yeah, the easiest way to think about that, Brad, is when you've got technologies like RPA or in some of the more recent ones like IDP and OCR and process mining and discovery, right? There are companies that take a very point-by-point approach and it comes and you say, how do I apply said tool in this area, which is one approach. And there's the other approach which says, how do I redesign my processes, taking into account now that I have technologies at my disposal that I didn't have 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And so that's the approach we found is actually much more rewarding and much more successful, where they redesign the entire process, taking into account some of these newer technologies. And that's what we found.
Okay. Leon, what is one of the most common characteristics that you identified among companies that have had the most success with their automation efforts?
I would summarize it into, I think there are two characteristics. Number one is, what are the objectives those successful companies set for their program? And two, around how they actually deploy the automation technologies. So let me kind of elaborate one by one. So on the first one, we have already discussed it earlier. So our study found that organizations with successful automation program tend to be those that really anchor their objectives around customer and employee experience. In other words, those companies that typically prioritize satisfaction as the primary factor that guides their automation program, as opposed to just expense reduction or some simple process improvements. We also have some data to support that. In our survey, we found that over half of the respondents from this group of automation leaders say their organization have customer experience initiatives that are coordinated with their automation efforts. As a matter of fact, compared to other organizations, those companies with successful automation programs are more than twice as likely to cite improving customer and employee experience as their chief motivation for automation to start with. And then I would say the other key to success is to ensure the employee participation in the automation effort, particularly those non-technical employees. For companies that we found successful with their automation programs, their employees are typically more involved early in the process. Those employees would help with activities such as solution design, user testing, et cetera, et cetera. We believe that those kind of involvements really improved ownership and adoption when the automation technologies or solutions are being launched. So these are the two things I would like to highlight.
It's really interesting to hear just how much of a theme there is around employee and customer experience.
I think just to call out the reason why I think that's coming up a lot more is I think in the wake of the pandemic and companies trying to just rethink not only how to actually drive growth under tremendous resource constraints, but also the highly competitive environment, the level of digitization also dramatically increased over the course of the last 24 months, if you will. And so I think, how do you retain customers? How do you actually retain employees in hybrid environments and in challenging times? I think that's where this experience element has come back up a lot more, right? So just something for us to keep in mind. The timing of this, of course, is all relative to where things are in the macro environment. But I think that is an important one for us to remember.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Rohit. Thank you. So Leon, you mentioned employee participation in automation. I've got to ask about citizen development. What did the survey reveal about that topic specifically?
Interesting question. So first of all, let me start by kind of defining citizen development. In many ways, it's a fancy term to basically assess the same thing as what I kind of mentioned earlier of getting the broader organization involved in the automation and technology deployment effort. So let me just define it. So generally speaking, citizen development means an automation deployment model, which encourages non-IT trained or non-technical employees to become actually the software or solution developers and owners eventually. This is made possible. Actually, part of it is because of the emergence of the local and no-code platforms and a lot of the cloud-based solutions that we talked about, because those solutions have a lot of out-of-the-box functionalities. They're also much more user-friendly, right? So those are the reasons that made it possible for those non-technical employees to actually get involved in the earlier phase of deployment. So I wanted to also cite some of the statistics we got from the survey. In our survey, we found that 57% of the organizations that are saying that they have adopted a citizen development model, which found this model is extremely helpful when they found that the work that can be automated is fragmented, or when they do not actually have enough IT resources to support all the automation use cases across the business, right? So that's one of the key reasons why some of the companies use citizen development model. And we also found that for those companies using the citizen development model, the adoption rate is much higher. Actually, approximately, I would say like 25% of the companies that are successful in their automation programs are embracing this citizen development model at a moderate or higher level based on the insight we got from our survey.
Interesting. So it's a lever for making it even more successful, it sounds like.
Exactly.
And what about the topic of reskilling the workforce? What did the survey reveal about that, Leon?
You ask another very important and interesting questions, right? First of all, again, let me define reskilling because it is also I would say, a very popular word these days. So when we are talking about reskilling, in our mind, it means a series of efforts. So it means how we can understand the automation impact to jobs and roles, first and foremost. And the second thing is that how can we also think about the new demand for maybe new type of talent and resources? And then how do we assess the workforce capability and provide the targeted training to close some of the gaps? So this is what we mean by reskilling. It is important because ultimately, in order to achieve the impact of automation, the organizations actually needs to reorganize what work is going to be done by who and how. We know for a fact that's going to be different than today, from today, where the automation is not as prevalent. A few other thoughts maybe to share related to the topic of reskilling. So as more transactional tasks are automated today, we found that 2/3 of the companies we surveyed, they see a growing demand for a different type of skill set. Those are more advanced cognitive skills, such as, quantitative and statistic skills like critical thinking, project management, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, we also see an equal percentage of respondents. They also expected to see an increase in demand for social and emotional skills, as you can think of it, such as communication more effectively, negotiation, leadership, and general entrepreneurship. Because of the shift in the kind of skill requirement, many companies are now undertaking the task of helping their employees build the capabilities they need to actually shift their job to more higher value adding tasks.
Additionally, Brad, one thing I'd like to add is that when we looked at companies that were successful with automation, the automation leaders, about 3/4 of them basically said that reskilling is a top 10 priority, right? And for those who aren't automation leaders or those still struggling with it, it doesn't even figure in that list, right? So to the point of just how important reskilling is and making sure it sticks, those who are successful make it a priority, and that's how it sticks.
Gotcha. And I really like the last point Leon made about reskilling the organization so that they can focus on higher value work. I mean, to me, that says automation is working, right? Because we're getting rid of the mundane, the monotonous, the work that humans really shouldn't focus on. We're getting them on to the higher value. And now that we're doing that, we need to give them new skills to be able to handle that effectively. So that's a fascinating finding, I believe. So Leon, let's talk about governance and governance models. What is the most common governance approach these days? from what you saw in the survey results?
Governance is actually one of the topics that we have consistently been asking companies in our survey over the past few years. So first and foremost, let me kind of do a little bit recap, right? When we are talking about governance model for automation, we typically see three types of models. And those three models vary primarily around to what extent the governance of automation is centralized. So you can think about it this way: fully centralized governance and fully decentralized governance model, they sit on the two ends of the spectrum. And then in the middle, it is what we call a federated governance model for automation.
Mhm.
Right? So three models here. Based on the survey result this year, we have seen a shift for companies to shift towards more of a federated governance model for automation. This essentially means that more companies are trying to govern and manage the automation effort with a central support team that provides necessary tools and capabilities to enable the broader part of the business and the company to participate in the automation program. So that's a newer trend that we have seen when it comes to governance.
That would appear to align pretty heavily with the whole citizen development movement. Would you agree?
I think so. And it also relates to the point Rohit made over the past 3 years because of the pandemic, because of a lot of the
Yep.
changes in the macroeconomic environment. Business just have so many priorities, and it like to deploy automation at scale in an effective way, they have to mobilize the broader organization. So that's probably the reason why.
Great point. Okay. Rohit, we talked about the pervasiveness of automation, the fact that most companies are now starting to expand into intelligent automation. What about the biggest challenge that companies are facing with their automation programs? What did the survey reveal on that?
Yeah, bro, this is an interesting one. So the respondents most often say that their organization's biggest challenge is not around how to deploy automation, but where, right? And
Mm.
so identification of automation opportunities, especially as in most of these organizations, they've taken a look already at the proverbial sort of low-hanging fruit, right?
Mhm.
And as processes get more complex and it's fragmented in different parts of the organization, as a large part of the workforce is potentially remote or in different locations, trying to really figure out where to go and automate is becoming quite challenging. And we've also seen respondents using some of the newer tools actually to help with this, right? So technologies like process mining and process discovery are rapidly gaining interest more because they can help identify opportunities for automation where otherwise you wouldn't necessarily go and look, right? By actually mining through a lot of the transaction data and figuring out steps as part of a broader complex process that you could drive automation in. This is an interesting one that's come up across both, by the way, leaders as well as those not moving up the curve as much yet.
Mhm. Yeah. It's great to hear that process and task mining and some of those newer technologies are in fact playing a role in helping them address this challenge. I was hoping you would say that. Well, Rohit, we've come to the end. Perhaps you could just wrap us up today and summarize what you believe to be the big takeaways from the survey findings.
Yeah, sure, Brad. I think there's overall 4 secrets, I think, to automation success if we can learn from these leaders. The first is to focus on employee and customer experience. We've talked about this a few times. Make the overall experience front and center and effectiveness front and center, not just the cost cutting and efficiency aspects.
Mhm.
The second is to actually rethink the entire end-to-end process and technology landscape to see the maximum benefits, right? So that is, don't really just go for the point solutions or the specific one or two use case. Take more of a domain-based approach, look end-to-end across a particular domain, and then rethink how you can clean sheet and zero-based design those processes around the technologies you have at your disposal. The third is to actually empower the business, right? So give individuals more autonomy to automate through some of these citizen developer models we've talked about. Have a team, of course, that helps guide them and support them and build their capabilities and make sure it's all done in a more standardized way and governed appropriately. But empower the business to actually be able to run this themselves so that you can really get the scale you need. And finally, invest in the training and the reskilling, right? You've got a talented workforce. You've got a workforce that's excited to actually dig in and help the organization grow and drive value in specific areas and help them with the resources and the tools to actually get the most out of their roles and embed sort of that learning and training model into their day-to-day, right? So be it through workshops or one-on-one coaching and so on. That's another critical piece to ensure that programs are successful. So I think in summary, those four are the main factors, I think, that are differentiating these automation leaders from the rest of the pack.
Thank you for that summary. Those are four really good points. I especially like your second one about taking a more holistic end-to-end process view when doing automation. To me, that ties directly to what I think Leon pointed out earlier about business process management becoming more of a fixture in automation programs, because to do the end-to-end view, you've got to have something that's going to take into account not just the digital worker activities, but also the human worker activities and manage that under one umbrella. So really, really good point. Well, gentlemen, thank you both for being on the podcast today and sharing your thoughts on the survey results. The findings are very enlightening and helpful to anyone who cares about intelligent automation. Again, the survey results summary is titled "Your Questions About Automation Answered" from McKinsey and Company. I will be sure and include a link to it in the podcast show notes. Thanks again, guys, and I wish you the very best.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for tuning in to Transform Now. For more insightful discussions on digital transformation and more, check out our podcast channel where you'll find all of our previous episodes. And to make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you like what you've heard, please leave us a review. For more information about digital transformation and the future of work, check out blueprism.com to learn how SS&C Blue Prism's digital workforce is enabling enterprise transformation now.